Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a nobleman, you're not a criminal, you're not anyone really, not anymore. You're just a softly breathing inconvenience in the bowels of a monarchy that prefers its mistakes in silence. You'll be taken without a word, escorted without a reason, and locked away under layers of stone and etiquette, so thick they suffocate even the concept of explanation. Your face will vanish behind iron, your name will dissolve behind protocol, and as the years grind on, you'll begin to wonder if you ever truly existed in the first place, or if you were simply a rumour with a pulse. Before your thoughts fray too much and the walls start whispering back, do me one small favour. Leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing who's listening to these dreadful histories. And if you'd like early access to more of these quietly horrifying bedtime stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. It begins with footsteps, not loud ones, not the dramatic clatter of soldiers storming in to seize a traitor. No, these are careful, controlled, sanded down to the bare minimum of human presence. You lie still in your bed, not fully awake, not fully dreaming, and for a moment you convince yourself it's nothing. Just the wind outside or servants moving too early. But then there's the knock. Not a bang, not a demand, just a knock, almost polite, almost bored. 4 taps, no urgency, no threat, just a signal that the decision has already been made. When the door opens, no one speaks. There are 6 of them, maybe 7. You don't count. You don't move. You could ask what this is about, but something in their faces tells you it wouldn't matter. They aren't angry. They aren't even interested. They've done this before, many times. You are not the first name on the list, and you will not be the last. Except you won't have a name for much longer. That too has already been decided. There are no shackles, no dramatic dragging. One gestures toward your slippers, another holds out a coat. The message is clear: walk or be carried. Either way, you are leaving. You pass servants in the hallway, but none of them meet your eyes. Either they've been warned, or they've seen this before. One young footman turns away just slightly too late. You catch the flicker of his expression. Not shock, not sorrow. Something closer to administrative discomfort. As if you've been categorised as a misplaced item now being returned to storage. He doesn't run to sound an alarm. He doesn't ask why you're being taken. He just steps aside, quietly, efficiently, as instructed. Outside, a closed carriage waits. No insignia, no guards in royal livery. Everything is designed to avoid attention. This isn't punishment, not exactly. It's prevention. You're not being tried for anything. You're not even being accused. You're being erased, painlessly, if possible. Thoroughly, without question. The coachman doesn't look at you. He doesn't even glance. One of the guards opens the door. Another places a hand, gently, professionally, on your back. Just enough pressure to suggest compliance, not enough to be called force. The door closes behind you with a soft click. You feel it more than hear it. The interior is dark but not filthy, cushioned but bare, nothing sharp, nothing loose, nothing that might leave a mark. You sit in silence, hands in your lap, watching shadows crawl across the walls as the carriage begins to move. No one says where you're going. You do not ask. There is a protocol being followed, and curiosity is not part of it. You tell yourself you'll get answers when you arrive, but even that thought feels hollow. You're already starting to understand. There are no answers, not for you. Hours pass, maybe more. There are no landmarks, no stars visible through the shuttered windows, just the rhythmic creak of the carriage and the distant clop of horses that don't know they're part of a conspiracy. You nod off briefly at some point, only to jolt awake when the carriage stops. You've arrived somewhere, but not somewhere you recognise. The building ahead is stone, thick-walled, featureless, no sign, no flag, just a gate that opens without question. The guards say nothing as they lead you through. You count the steps, as if that will help. 32 from the gate to the door. Another 14 down a hallway that smells like wet parchment and vinegar. Then stairs, cold ones. Down, always down. Your cell isn't a dungeon. Not quite. It's clean in its way. No straw, no filth. Just a small cot, a wooden stool, and a table that looks like it was once part of a monastery, before someone decided even monks didn't need comfort. The walls are solid, thick, built for silence. You sit on the cot, you do not speak. There is nothing to say. The guard locks the door, you hear the key turn. Then footsteps retreating. Not hurried, not cruel, just indifferent. You are alone. You wait for someone to come back and tell you what this is. A magistrate, perhaps. A clerk with a folder. Even a priest with a comforting lie. But no one comes. Not that day, not the next. Food arrives through a slot in the door. Bread, thin broth, water, the essentials. No utensils, no voice. The tray arrives and disappears without a face. You start to wonder if it's the same person each time, or if they're rotating guards to prevent familiarity. A little bureaucratic touch, designed to ensure that even kindness doesn't accidentally happen. You try to measure time by the meals, but even that slips. One day the food comes early, the next it's late. Then 2 arrive in a row, or maybe you forgot one. You're not sure. There's no sun in your room, just a damp chill that seeps into your bones and makes every minute feel like it's stuck in molasses. You dream, but the dreams are already beginning to blur with the silence. You wake with words on your tongue, but they vanish before you speak them. You keep thinking someone will explain. That surely even kings need a reason. But none is given. And as the hours become days and the days stop being distinct, a quiet realization begins to settle in the back of your mind. You're not being punished, you're being misfiled, neatly, permanently, without a single word. You don't remember how long it takes before they move you the first time. You're not warned. There's no knock, no command, no reason offered. Just the door unlocking in the middle of the night, and 3 men standing there, faceless in the shadows, waiting for you to stand up and follow. You hesitate for only a moment, long enough to remember that hesitation no longer matters. Then you rise, they place something in your hand. Fabric, a blindfold. You tie it yourself. That's the kind of detail they've mastered, leaving just enough dignity for you to participate in your own disappearance. They don't speak on the way out. Their boots echo down the corridor, steady and close. You can't see, but you feel the coldness of the hall, the change in pressure with each step upward. You're not told what time it is. Could be midnight, could be dawn. The air smells like rain, but you don't hear it falling. They guide you out of the building, not harshly, just firmly. One guard touches your shoulder from behind, steering like someone moving a chess piece they've already decided is lost. You're helped into a cart this time, wooden, rough, the kind that jolts with every stone in the road. No windows, no openings, just a box with wheels. You sit in the dark and feel every jolt as a reminder. You're cargo now. Hours pass, or maybe a day. It's impossible to tell. No light, no voices. The occasional squeal of a wheel or the muffled snort of a horse is the only evidence that time is still moving. Your legs go numb, your back aches. You think of asking for water but decide against it. It wouldn't be denied necessarily, but it would be noted. And you've started to learn that being noticed isn't a blessing. It's a liability. So you sit, still, quiet, waiting for the next command you won't be given. Eventually the cart stops. You brace for the door to open, for the guards to reappear, but they don't. Not at first, just silence, then the creak of footsteps on gravel, a key in a lock. The door swings open, and sunlight punches through your blindfold. A hand helps you down, impersonal, gloved. You're led across uneven ground, through what might be trees or open field or graveyard. You can't know. You're not allowed to know. That's the point. Knowledge implies identity. Geography implies orientation. But you're not a person anymore. You're a secret, being transferred through increasingly forgettable hands. You hear water at some point. A river, maybe. The creak of oars, the hollow splash of wood on current. They ferry you across, still blindfolded, still silent. Someone coughs behind you. Someone else whispers. You're aware of being watched, but not as a man, more as a burden. The kind that no one wants to claim responsibility for, but no one dares mishandle. The boat touches land again, and the routine continues. Stone steps, narrow corridors. Another set of guards who never ask your name because they've been told not to. You don't stay long. A few days maybe, or a week. This next cell is colder, smaller, and oddly clean. They give you food, but they don't ask questions. You don't either, because now you understand. Asking is a waste of breath. The only answer you'll ever get is relocation. So when they come again at night, again without warning, you rise before they speak. You hold out your hand for the blindfold. They don't look surprised. They don't look at all. This time it's a coach, upholstered, padded, better than the cart. Though not by much. Still no windows, still no voice. You try to keep track of turns, of the sway of the vehicle, of how long between stops. But you're tired. Your thoughts drift. You lose count. That too is by design. They don't just want to erase where you are. They want to erase your ability to notice where you are. They want dislocation to feel natural. You begin to measure time, not by light or meals, but by the changes in vehicle. One leg of the journey is a boat, another a coach, another something slower, possibly carried. You think you hear chains once, not yours but someone else's. A prisoner nearby perhaps, or maybe just the guards transporting supplies. You never find out. The walls are too thick and the blindfold stays on. No one ever tells you the name of the place you're in. You don't even hear it by accident. They're careful with language. Even the guards speak in fragments. Take him. This one. Move now. They avoid pronouns. They avoid titles. You've become allergic to identity. Even the sound of your own name, if someone were to say it, might cause you to flinch. Somewhere along the way, you stop wondering what you're being moved for. You begin to realize that this drifting, this blind shuffle from cell to cell, this constant unstitching of context is the punishment, or the solution, or both. You are not being interrogated, you are not being corrected, you are being dismantled delicately through distance. You are a problem being passed quietly down a hallway with no end. You eventually reach a final destination. The fortress is stone. That much you can tell through your boots as you walk, blindfolded, across the uneven ground. The sound changes. Gravel becomes slabs. The air thins and the cold sharpens. You've been moved so many times now that you no longer try to guess where you are. But you can feel altitude in your lungs. You can hear the wind behaving differently. Less like breeze, more like something trapped between mountains. When the blindfold finally comes off, it's not dramatic. Just a hand, impersonal and gloved, tugging the cloth away like peeling an old label off a jar no one plans to use again. In front of you, thick walls, snow melt in the cracks, iron hinges blotched with rust, but still functional. You've arrived at Pignerol. It's not a prison in the traditional sense. No screaming, no whipping posts, no screaming jailers or iron branding. The cruelty here is more refined. It isn't expressed in action, but in the lack of it. No one yells, no one glares. The guards wear faces like dried wax, pale and drained of features. When they speak, it's in short phrases. Wait here. Move now. This way. Not commands exactly, more like the verbal equivalent of a stamp on a shipping crate. You are to be stored. Safely. Out of sight. The jailer doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't offer a name. He opens your cell door with a key the size of your forearm, gestures once and walks away. No dramatic closing. No slam. just the weight of the door easing shut behind you, followed by the heavy sound of the lock sliding into place, a click so final that it echoes despite the walls doing their best to swallow every sound. The cell is neither small nor large, it's just enough to contain you without space for pacing, enough to lie down, but not far from the food slot. Everything has been measured. You are not meant to suffer. You are meant to stagnate. The walls are made of stone, uneven and damp. At first glance they appear natural, almost cave-like, but the shape is too deliberate. No windows, no torch brackets. Just a single, narrow ventilation slit, high near the ceiling, which lets in neither warmth nor light. Just a suggestion of weather beyond reach. You try once to call out, to test the echo, to hear your voice exist for a moment. But the sound dies immediately, as if the air has been taught to ignore you. Even the acoustics feel engineered to discourage identity. There's a cot made of wood and rope, sagging slightly in the centre. The mattress is a thin sack of straw, already flattened by someone else's long stay. A blanket rests at the foot, folded by someone who no longer cares about precision. You run your hand over the fabric and find it rough but clean. That's the pattern here. Functional, hygienic, but pointedly impersonal. They don't want you to die, they just don't want you to matter. The food arrives twice a day, you think. Always the same. A ladle of broth, a crust of bread, and water. Sometimes the bread is warm. Sometimes it isn't. There's no pattern to that either. It just happens. The tray slides through the wall on a wooden shelf that creaks once and disappears when the meal is over. You never see who prepares it. No footsteps approach, no shadows under the door. Just the food appearing, without intention, like dew or mould. You take to eating it silently, because chewing is the only noise that reliably answers back. The first few nights, you try to listen, really listen, for signs of life. Voices through the stone, coughs, snoring, chains, anything to suggest you're not the only one. But the silence is too complete. Either no one else is here, or the design is working perfectly. You suspect the latter. It would be inefficient to isolate you by accident. Eventually, you stop listening. You stop expecting noise. You begin to understand that the fortress isn't just meant to contain you. It's meant to erase the idea that there was ever anything to contain. You mark the days at first, tracing little notches into the edge of the cot with your fingernail. 5 marks, then a space. 5 more. After a while, though, the wood becomes resistant. Your nail wears down. You try with a tooth once. The taste of the splinters lingers longer than the mark lasts. Eventually, you stop marking. You decide you've made your point. Once, just once, a guard lingers after delivering food. You hear him pause, not speak, not cough, just pause, long enough that you almost ask him a question. You form the word in your mouth, why, but you never speak it. You never move. After a few seconds, he walks away. You don't know if it was a mistake or a test. Either way, you don't try again. There is nothing cruel in the treatment. You sleep, eat, relieve yourself in a bucket you clean weekly. You aren't beaten. You aren't yelled at. You are, in every technical sense, fine. But that's the worst of it. You're not suffering. You're disappearing. Day by day, cell by cell, meal by meal. The walls do not answer. The air does not carry your breath far enough to return. Your body is intact, but something else is wearing away. Pignerol does not want you dead. It wants you quiet, dull, harmless, forgotten. It is succeeding. It doesn't come on the first day, or the first week, or even the first month. Not that you can measure time anymore. It arrives after you've started to believe you've been forgotten entirely, when the routines have dulled into background noise, and your body has resigned itself to the rhythm of silence. One day, without warning, the guards open the door. There are 3 of them this time, not the usual 2. You know instantly that something has changed. They say nothing. One of them holds something in both hands, wrapped in coarse cloth. When he unfolds it, you see iron. Matte, heavy, not decorative, not cruel, just functional. A mask, full-faced, with small eye holes and a narrow slit at the mouth. It looks less like a punishment and more like a lid, a seal, something meant to keep something in or keep something out. They don't explain why you're to wear it. They don't tell you where you're going. One of them gestures for you to stand. You do. You don't resist. Resistance isn't part of the vocabulary anymore. The mask is lifted, and for a moment you hesitate, wondering if you're meant to put it on yourself. But they don't wait. One holds your shoulders while the other lowers it into place. The metal is cold. Not painfully so, but cold enough to make you blink. You feel the pressure settle over your cheekbones, your nose, your jaw. A strap is fastened tightly behind your head. The mask hums against your skin with the sound of your own breath. They guide you out of the cell. You walk, you count the steps, though you know it doesn't matter. The mask dulls your peripheral vision. It frames the world in hard borders. Everything outside of the tunnel it allows you to see becomes irrelevant. You're aware of the guards, one on each side, and the rhythm of your boots on stone. You're not led far, just to a room you haven't seen before. There's a chair. You're told to sit. They don't speak directly. They gesture. You obey. You wait like that for some time. Long enough to wonder if this is a punishment or a test. Then someone else enters. You can't see their face. They don't speak. You hear papers rustling. You hear murmuring. And then they leave. The guards return. They remove the mask, wordlessly, and guide you back to your cell. It's over in less than an hour. But something has changed. You don't know why the mask was required. Maybe the visitor wasn't allowed to see your face. Maybe you weren't allowed to see theirs. Maybe it's not about you at all. Maybe it's about protocol, damage control, a layer of plausible deniability. But that night, when you lie down, you feel the memory of the mask more acutely than you felt the mask itself. The pressure is gone, but your neck remains stiff, as if bracing for a weight that's no longer there. It happens again, weeks later. Another visit, another transfer. You're blindfolded first this time, then masked. You begin to suspect the order isn't accidental. They don't want you to know who's seeing you. They don't want anyone to know who they're seeing. You've become a shadow passed through shadows, sealed at both ends. Over time, the mask becomes a kind of punctuation mark. You begin to associate it with movement, with exposure, with moments when your existence intersects. However briefly, with the world outside your cell. You start to expect it before you're even told. You feel its absence before it arrives. Once you find yourself adjusting your posture automatically, craning your neck to avoid hitting the metal edges against your shoulder. Except you're not wearing it. You haven't been for days. You stop being able to tell when it's on and when it's off. The sensation lingers long after it's removed. You feel it when you're eating, when you're dreaming, when you're sitting perfectly still. You reach for your food slowly, cautiously, as though you're still having to slip it through a narrow slit. You catch yourself tilting your head to the side when you sip water, instinctively compensating for a mouth that's no longer sealed. You try to shake the habit, but it's sunk too deep. You wonder if that's the point. The mask doesn't have to be permanent to be effective. It doesn't need to remain on your face to shape how you think, how you move, how you inhabit yourself. It becomes a blueprint for forgetting, a training device for erasure. It teaches your body to forget its own face, to expect silence, to move quietly and see narrowly. You begin to carry it even when it's not there, a phantom weight, a learned posture, a self-contained prison. And perhaps that's the deeper cruelty, not that they masked you, but that they didn't need to. They only had to do it a few times, just enough for your mind to finish the job. You're no longer a man with a face. You're a man who flinches when the wind touches his cheeks, a man who lowers his gaze instinctively, a man who sometimes catches his reflection in a puddle and recoils. Not because he doesn't recognize himself, but because for a moment he does. And it's wrong, and unfamiliar, and too exposed. They put the mask on you to make you disappear. And now, even when it's gone, it still works. At first you try to keep count. Of what exactly, you're not sure. Days, meals, dreams, maybe all three. You tell yourself that as long as you can track time, you haven't disappeared. You wake with purpose, mark a tally in your head, and wait for the food slot to open, like it's a ritual that proves the outside world still exists. Morning means bread and broth. Evening means the same. 2 meals a day, easy to count. You build your rhythm from that. 6 meals is 3 days. 12 is 6. 30 means 2 weeks, probably. You start to feel proud of the math, as though you're winning some quiet invisible game. But then something slips. The food doesn't come when you expect it. Or maybe it does and you slept through it. Or maybe you dreamed it arrived and cleaned the tray in your sleep. There's no conversation to orient you, no bell, no voice, no natural cue. Just the tray, or the absence of the tray. You begin to second guess yourself. The intervals stretch and twist. The rhythm you built starts to unravel. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but a part of you knows it once did, and might still. There are no clocks, no bells, no changing shadows on the wall, save for the faint, slow shift of light through the slit near the ceiling. Even that's unreliable. Some days it's too dim to see anything. Others it's blinding and harsh, offering nothing but confusion. You try to track the angle of the light on the floor, but the geometry keeps changing. Or maybe you're just imagining it. You don't trust your eyes anymore. You blink and wonder if what you're seeing is real or just another piece of the routine you've rehearsed so many times that it's begun to write itself. Your dreams change. At first they're vivid. Voices from somewhere else. Rooms you used to know. The smell of bread or pine or ocean air. You wake feeling something close to emotion. Warmth, grief, relief. But it fades within seconds. Later, the dreams repeat. Not gently. They rot. You see the same door open 10 nights in a row. You walk down the same corridor again and again, chasing a sound that never resolves. Sometimes, the dreams stop pretending to be dreams at all. You wake in the same position you fell asleep in, convinced you didn't sleep at all. Just blinked, just paused. The mask is rarely used now, only during movement, only when someone from the outside might see you. But even when it's gone, you still feel it. That narrow field of vision, that dull pressure across your nose, that subtle echo in your ears. It's all still there, filed into your body like a reflex. You reach for your food cautiously, like you still have to slip it through a slit. You turn your head carefully, as if any sudden movement might knock metal against metal. It's not on your face, but you move like it is. You think like it is. You lie down at night and still expect to hear your breath bounce back at you. You start telling yourself stories, not aloud, just in your mind, quietly, on loop. You recite fragments of books, childhood games, songs you half remember. You try to reconstruct a conversation. You try to picture your face, but it's harder now. The features blur. The face you imagine changes slightly each time. Narrower, paler, unfamiliar. Eventually, you stop trying. You begin to replace your own face with the mask. Not because you want to, but because it's the only version that sticks. Sometimes you say a word aloud, just to hear yourself. Your voice comes out dry, flat, unfamiliar. Not distorted anymore. There's no mask on, but still wrong. Hollow, unused. You speak softer with each attempt until you stop trying. Not because it's forbidden, but because it doesn't sound like you. And eventually, it doesn't sound like anyone. You start forgetting more important things. Names, places, whether the year has turned, whether the world outside your walls is still there. You try to remember if you had a profession, a title. Did you write? Did you sing? Did you believe in something? You remember holding a pen, but not what it wrote. You remember once being asked a question, but not your answer. These are not gaps anymore. They are hollows. There's a day, though it might have been night, when you realise you no longer have any guess how long you've been here. A year, 3, a month. The question doesn't panic you. It just hangs in your chest like smoke. If someone opened the door and told you it had been 10 years, you'd nod. If they said it was yesterday, you wouldn't argue. You've stopped resisting the blur. You've become part of it. To stay sane or something near it, you create rituals. You fold the blanket. You tap the edge of the cot with your toe before sitting. You run your hand across the wall in the same pattern each day. The motions don't mean anything, but they feel necessary, like they're holding the edges of your mind together. If you skip a step, you feel unmoored. The shape of the day collapses. You drift for hours without knowing why. You think once about asking a guard for the date, just to hear something fixed, something numerical, but you know it wouldn't help. Whatever they said would feel unreal, arbitrary, a word from a language you don't speak anymore. You live on a different timeline now, one without hours, without weekends, without seasons, just repetition, like tidewater. Just breath and dust and stone. Eventually, you stop trying to keep time. You stop even pretending. The days are not days, they are stretches, lengths, textures. The past is soft. The future is air. The present is broth and silence, and a body that has learned to wait without hope. You still breathe. You still sleep. You still wake. But the person doing those things no longer expects to be counted. You're not supposed to hear anything. That much is clear. But people make mistakes, even here, especially when they think you're asleep. Sometimes a guard speaks too close to the door. Sometimes 2 of them forget how well stone carries sound. You lie still on your cot, eyes closed, body still, and listen. It becomes a habit. Listening replaces speaking. You learn more from silence than you ever did from questions. The words you catch are rarely whole, just fragments, drifting like soot from a fire no one wants to admit is still burning. He was supposed to be no trial, just gone. Not even the Queen knows. You learn quickly not to react, even inwardly. Hope is too sharp to hold for long, but you begin to collect what you hear. Little clues, possible pasts. You become a curator of whispered theories. Some say you're a nobleman who crossed the wrong minister. Others suggest a general, fallen from favour. There's even a murmur once that you're a royal bastard, tucked away to protect a lineage, too fragile to tolerate questions. None of the stories feel like yours, but they might be. After so long, the edges of memory blur. You remember sensations more than facts. The scent of lavender, the sound of Latin prayers, the way expensive fabric used to itch at the collar. You begin to wonder whether your past matters at all, whether it ever did. In this place, identity doesn't come from what you did. It comes from what someone feared you might. The rumours grow stranger with time. Someone mutters that you were the king's twin, locked away to protect succession. Another insists you led a failed rebellion. One night, you hear guards arguing about it, not heated, not loud, but sharp-edged, like old gossip with splinters still in it. One says, it's not what he did, it's what they thought he could do. The other replies, then why the mask? A pause, no answer, just silence. Then boots on stone walking away. You don't know which version is worse, that you're here for something real, or something imagined. Either way, your body is behind stone, and your name isn't spoken. You begin to ask yourself what kind of threat you might have once been. Were you clever? Dangerous? Did you write letters people were afraid to read? Did your presence unsettle courtiers, just enough to matter? You try to imagine yourself as someone worth silencing, and for a brief moment it feels noble, but then you remember how little of yourself remains. The mask itself becomes part of the legend. It isn't worn every day, but it's remembered every day. They bring it out when they move you, when someone might glimpse you, when secrecy requires ceremony. And that ritual of covering your face to mark your danger or your shame starts to warp the rumours around you. They had to put a mask on him, someone whispers. That's how dangerous he was? It doesn't matter that you're not wearing it now. The symbol sticks harder than the iron ever did. You begin to wonder if that's all you are now. A cautionary tale. A warning dressed in rust. The mask is an argument in favour of obedience. You imagine your name, or what's left of it, spoken behind closed doors, always in the past tense, always carefully. You're not a man anymore. You're a lesson, a reference point, a silence others point to when they need to end a conversation. Some nights you try to reconstruct yourself from what's left. Not memory, that's too fragile, but probability. You speak French, you recognise the Psalms, you know how to sit up straight without thinking about it. Your hands are soft, your nails were once trimmed by someone else. Whoever you weren't a farmer. That's as much as you're sure of. You build a profile, a scaffolding, a faint outline. It shifts every time you look at it. And even that flicker of certainty rots beneath the weight of doubt. What if you were no one? A mistake? A case of wrong place, wrong moment, wrong face? What if the mask wasn't meant for you, and you were simply the man nearest the door when fear came looking for someone to disappear? You begin to understand that in a system like this, guilt doesn't matter, only utility. You don't have to be guilty to be removed. You just have to be useful to someone's silence. It's not hard to picture a king like Louis, gilded, theatrical, certain, signing an order he never read, brushing a problem off his lap with a flick of lace. You don't hate him. You barely think of him. The man who condemned you may not even remember you. That somehow is worse. You dream once, more vividly than usual, of a room with red velvet curtains and polished boots. You're standing. You're speaking. Someone listens. Then the dream vanishes like fog, and you wake breathless. The cot is cold. The air is still. The mask is not on your face, but the silence has already returned. And so the mask remains, not physically, but culturally, symbolically. It stays in the stories, in the gaps, in the careful way guards avoid your eyes. It does its job whether it's worn or not. No one visits to explain. No one corrects the record. You're not given the dignity of certainty, only of continued containment. And you begin to wonder whether the mask was ever meant to hide your face at all, or whether it was built to hide the system that put it there. They don't tell you it's happening. You wake, if you were ever truly asleep, to the sound of the key turning in the lock. You're already upright by the time the door creaks open. The guards don't speak. They don't need to. One of them carries a folded cloth, another carries iron. You know what to do. You sit still as they fit the mask over your face, adjusting the straps until it presses into the skin, beneath your eyes, the bridge of your nose, the edge of your jaw. It's familiar now, not comfortable, but no longer foreign. Just part of the ritual. Then the blindfold comes. You tie it yourself, over the mask. It blocks the narrow eye slits entirely. Double-layered anonymity. You don't resist. You never do. They don't bind your wrists. There's no need. You walk because you're told to, even when the order is silent. Even when you can't see where you're going. Especially then. You feel the air change as you move. The corridor narrows, then widens. The temperature drops. You hear the scrape of boots on stone, the creak of hinges as you're loaded into the carriage. The mask muffles the world. The blindfold removes it entirely. You feel the sway of the wheels beneath you, the lurch of turns, the subtle shift in pace that tells you you're leaving the fortress behind. Somewhere nearby, a trumpet calls out, bright and triumphant, as if someone else's life is proceeding joyfully. You keep your head down. Not that it matters. Iron and cloth keep your world small. The ride is longer this time, rougher. You lose track of the jolts. The scent of chimney smoke thickens, mingling with the stink of mud and horses. Cities have a way of announcing themselves, even when unseen. Eventually the carriage slows, stops, the door opens, hands guide you forward. The blindfold is removed, not the mask. You blink at the light, and then you see it, the outer gate, towering, severe, twin turrets flanking the arched entry like silent judges. The Bastille. You've never seen it before, but you know it instantly. This isn't a prison. It's a message carved into stone. A symbol so heavy it doesn't need to threaten. It simply waits. The gate swallows you. Behind it, the sound of the carriage pulling away echoes like a verdict. Inside, everything shifts. Not just the air, but the silence. It's deeper here, thicker. The guards don't chat among themselves. They don't shuffle. They move like men operating near something radioactive. You feel them flanking you, close and careful, as though you might detonate if handled incorrectly. They don't speak to you. You're not sure they've been told your name or care. You are not a person. You are a procedure. The mask stays on until you reach the cell. You hear the hinges groan. You're steered inward. Then, only once the door is shut behind you, do they remove it. The iron lifts away from your skin, with a faint suction, like pulling cloth from an old wound. Your face stings in the air, but the relief is brief. The room around you is colder than the mask. This cell is smaller, squared off. The walls feel denser somehow, designed not just to keep you in, but to keep everything else out. Your footsteps sound wrong, dampened by stone that's been engineered to absorb memory. The cot is bolted, the stool is bolted, even the shelf doesn't shift. Nothing here is meant to move. Movement implies freedom. This place doesn't. There's a window slit, narrower than before, higher too. It offers nothing. No sky, no breeze, just pale light, diluted and directionless. You sit. Not because you're told, but because standing feels pointless. The mask has left a ring of warmth around your face, like a ghost of its pressure. You rub your eyes, but the echo of the iron doesn't leave. The silence is worse than Pignerol. There it felt accidental. Here it's engineered. Your meals arrive with mechanical regularity, placed through a slot that closes before you can even look up. The guards don't glance at you. They don't linger. There's an efficiency to their avoidance, like they've been trained to treat you not with cruelty, but with complete administrative distance. You are inventory, fragile, possibly contagious, not physically but politically. You try to hear something, anything, through the walls, but there is nothing. No footsteps, no coughs, no soft murmurs from other cells. Either there's no one else, or whatever is on the other side has been buried as deeply as you. You begin to suspect this isn't just a prison. It's a sorting system for truths that can't be spoken aloud. You learn the rules quickly, though no one ever states them. Don't approach the door too soon. Don't speak aloud. Don't tap the walls. The consequences are minor, but unmistakable. A missed meal, a longer wait between linen changes. You begin to wonder how many such corrections have been logged. You imagine a ledger with your cell number at the top, columns filled out with ticks, notations in shorthand. Behaviour monitored not for reform, but for rot. You wonder who signed the order that brought you here. The king, a minister, someone whose name you once spoke aloud, casually, never guessing it would one day replace your own. You try to picture the decision being made. You hope there was hesitation, even a moment's pause, but you doubt it. You were moved because you are easier to store than explain. You hear music once, just for a moment. A harpsichord, a violin, faint from somewhere high above. You close your eyes and pretend it's real. Not because you believe it is, but because pretending feels like an act of protest. The mask is off, but it hasn't really left. You still hear your breath echo in your skull. You still flinch at your own reflection. You still speak in half whispers, even when no one's listening. And so you lie back on the bolted cot, the stone pressing cold into your spine, the air tasting like rust. You are not punished here. You are not interrogated. You are not tried. You are stored. Neatly. Quietly. Like a classified file in a locked cabinet. Unopened, unexplained, and never destroyed. There's a pattern to the way they handle you, though no one ever speaks of it. You begin to notice how the guards change more often than necessary, not rotated, replaced, quietly. You grow accustomed to the rhythm. Faces you start to recognize vanish without a word. New ones arrive without introduction. No one says goodbye. No one says anything at all. They don't want familiarity. That's the rule. You're not to be known. You exist within the system, but just barely. Meals arrive. The cot is cleaned. The bucket is emptied. Someone keeps track, but you never see a scrap of writing. Not a list, not a name tag, not a mark on the wall. If records exist, they don't exist here. Not in this room. Not in this wing. Not in this version of the world. If someone's logging your days, they're doing it far away, in pencil, with the intention of erasing it the moment it's read. Your name, if it's anywhere, is a footnote that no longer links to anything. Occasionally, you glimpse letters in the hands of officers as they pass by the hallway beyond your door. Sealed messages bearing ribbons and wax, passed along like holy writ. You never see them opened, never see them written. One time, you catch a glimpse of a message being fed into a brazier. It burns cleanly, without ceremony. You suspect it mentioned you, not directly, just enough to be dangerous. Nothing that could be read twice. No one refers to you by title or name. When the guards speak, rarely, it's always in euphemism. The delivery. The assignment from upstairs. The quiet one. You're an abstraction, an entry on a checklist that no one's allowed to clarify. You strain to catch meaning from half sentences and coded gestures, but no one gives you more than a breadcrumb, and even those taste like ash. Once you hear someone say your name, not clearly, not loudly, but enough. 2 guards on shift change, whispering just beyond the edge of your hearing. The word reaches you as a question, or maybe a warning. You don't know if it's real, but for a few days after, you repeat it in your head like a prayer. You savor the shape of it in your mouth. Though you never say it aloud, it fades eventually, like everything else. But for a moment, you remember what it felt like to be a person. You begin to understand that the Bastille isn't just a prison, it's a filtration system for inconvenient facts. There are other prisoners here. You've seen them, glimpsed shadows in other courtyards, heard faint footsteps in neighbouring corridors. But even among them, you're something else. They talk. They're allowed visitors. Some even leave. You are none of those things. You're the rumour they're instructed not to repeat. And it's not because you're dangerous. Not in the traditional sense. You're not violent. You're not plotting. You have no means to resist, and you've been given no opportunity to try. You're not being punished. You're being preserved, shelved, hidden. You represent a decision someone powerful can't afford to revisit. Not because of what you might do, but because of what your existence admits. The monarchy thrives on spectacle, crowns, parades, gilded declarations. But beneath the gold is a network of silence, a bureaucracy of erasure. You've become part of that machinery. The file too sensitive to destroy, too embarrassing to acknowledge. You're no longer a man. You're a sealed envelope with no return address. You imagine yourself drawn on a map of the Bastille, not as a name, but a blank square with no label. Do not disturb. Even the air seems curated. You never smell anything that doesn't belong. No candles, no food from other cells, no sweat, no rot. Just clean stone and the faint metallic tang of the water basin. Nothing drifts in. Nothing leaks out. You lie awake sometimes listening to that silence, trying to imagine someone out there remembering you. A courtier who once met your gaze, a clerk who handled your papers, a minister who signed the order and never asked where it led. But memory is dangerous in a place like this. Better to forget you filed something than risk recalling what it was. You picture it often, a nobleman sipping wine by the fire, your name flickering through his mind like a draft. He pauses, blinks, then lets it pass. too long ago, too uncertain. Someone else's problem, somewhere else. You imagine the king himself, perhaps once, briefly, being reminded. A whisper during a meeting, a name mispronounced, a servant corrected, and then forgotten again. Lost in a swirl of court flattery and powdered wigs and the latest intrigue. Memory in the royal court is a liability, and so no one remembers, because no one is allowed to. That's the culture you're locked inside. Not just stone and rules, but willful, active forgetting. You are the human equivalent of a redacted paragraph, present but unacknowledged, not dramatic, not defiant, just quietly erased. The mask, when it's used, reminds you of this. Its return is never explained. It's placed on for movement, for protocol, for visibility. It's not to silence you. It's to remind everyone else that you're not to be seen clearly, that your face is an offence, that your identity is hazardous in its ambiguity. You wonder how many guards have told their replacements, "Don't ask." How many officers have burned letters before finishing them? You are an open secret with no handle. Better to wear the mask than risk being remembered. So you stay silent, you eat when they let you, you sleep when you can. You fold the same blanket, pace the same 10 steps. You don't speak, not because it's forbidden, but because, what would you say? Who would write it down? Who would admit they heard? You are not serving time. You are serving silence, not for your crime, but for theirs. At some point, you stop trying to speak. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no vow of silence, no dramatic collapse. Just a slow erosion of habit. A moment where you begin to whisper something, then forget why. A thought that makes it to your tongue, but never past your teeth. Eventually, even your inner voice seems to grow quieter, as if reluctant to speak into such a vast, unreceptive silence. You tell yourself it's because the guards never respond, or because there's no point. But deep down, you know it's because you're starting to forget the sound of yourself. The mask only returns when they move you. It doesn't live on your face permanently, but it lives nearby, in a box, on a hook, or maybe in a drawer that clicks shut. You've heard it clink when the guards retrieve it. You felt it pressed down over your skull before a journey. The weight is always the same, and yet somehow heavier each time. It isn't pain that makes you dread it. It's what it does to your memory. The moment the straps are buckled, everything inside your head folds inward. Your world becomes breath and pressure, and the faint metallic taste that never entirely washes out. You don't scream. You don't fight. You let them secure it, and you walk. Even when the mask isn't on, you feel it. Not physically, but residually. You catch yourself moving like you're still wearing it, ducking slightly through doorways, turning your head instead of your eyes, speaking too softly to be heard. Your neck remembers the weight. Your spine anticipates it. You dream about it more than you wear it now. And when you wake up sweating in the dark, you have to touch your face to be sure it's really gone. You haven't seen your reflection in years. At first you tried to hold the memory of it, what you looked like in a basin of water, or the shine of polished glass, a shape, a nose, a line at the jaw, but even those outlines have faded. You try to recall your skin tone, your eye colour, your mouth, nothing returns. You used to have a scar behind your ear, or maybe that was someone else. The idea of your own face has become abstract, a myth. You know you had one. You just don't know what it was. Your posture has changed. You used to walk with some degree of grace, though you can't remember why. Maybe you were important. Maybe you were confident. Now your steps are cautious, not from fear, but because urgency feels ridiculous. Where would you go faster? What would change? You still pace your cell, but it's more about inertia than intention. If you stay too still, your body forgets what movement is supposed to feel like. So you walk, slowly, uselessly, just enough to remember that you can. The past doesn't disappear all at once. It peels away in fragments. You forget how old you are. Then you forget where you were born. You forget the name of the street your house was on. then the house itself. You try to remember a friend's voice. You think of a joke someone told you once, but the punchline is gone. You remember laughing, but not why. Crying, but not for what. It all loses colour, as if viewed through water. You begin to wonder if these memories even belong to you. Maybe you've inherited them from someone else, a previous tenant of your mind. Your name clings longer than the rest. You repeat it to yourself sometimes, silently, like a ritual, a defence against total dissolution. It feels strange now, too sharp around the edges, too formal. One night, you try saying it aloud. The sound startles you, not because of the acoustics, but because it feels like the word belongs to someone else. You try again, quieter. It doesn't help. The syllables echo back without conviction. You stop. There's no audience, no acknowledgement, just the sound of something failing to stick. Eventually, your name fades. Not in a dramatic way, but like the last lines of a dream you forget by breakfast. You don't fight to keep it. You just stop reaching for it. In its place, routine settles in. The folding of the blanket, the pacing of the wall, the careful tracking of meals you no longer count. You are no longer a person. You're a presence, a shape in the room, a breath in the dark. You suspect this is the point. Not death, not punishment, just unraveling, not as a warning to others, but as a solution. You were a problem once, something inconvenient, too entangled to be cut cleanly. So they unmade you instead, not with violence, but with procedure. First your name, then your story, then your voice. They didn't break you. They deleted you, slowly, precisely, without ever needing to explain why. Sometimes you wonder what you'd do if the door opened and someone asked, "Who are you?" You play out the scenario in your head. You try to imagine the words forming. You reach for a name, any name, and there's only a pause, a heavy one. Not fearful, just blank. You'd look at them unsure whether to answer, not because you're hiding, but because you don't know what's missing, only that something is. And so you continue, breathing, eating, sleeping, pacing. The guards change again. The air doesn't. The silence holds. No one calls you anything, and that's what you become. Not a prisoner, not a man, just a quiet space where a person used to be. It isn't the iron itself that undoes you. You could withstand the weight. You already have, more times than you can count. They only put it on when they move you, when there's a risk of being seen, of being noticed. And yet it manages to take more from you than the cell ever has. Not because it's constant, but because it returns. Always unexpected, always final. They bring it out like a ritual. No words, no explanation, just the scraping of the chest opening, the gleam of iron in torchlight, the soft clatter of straps laid out on stone. You've seen it enough times now that your breath begins to quicken before they ever touch you. The mask is fitted over your face without ceremony, drawn snug against your cheeks, your brow, your jaw. Then comes the blindfold, fastened over the mask, thick enough to smother all light. That's when the world ends. For minutes, sometimes hours. You don't scream, you don't resist. You learned early that neither would matter. So you retreat inward. You count your breaths. You try to slow your heartbeat. You focus on the smallest things. The pressure against the bridge of your nose. The metallic taste that rises in the back of your throat. The way your exhale fogs the interior just slightly before vanishing. These sensations become the whole of your existence while it's on. And yet it's after the mask comes off that the real damage begins. It leaves no wounds, no bruises, but it leaves impressions. You feel it long after it's gone. You feel its pressure at the corners of your mouth when you try to eat. You feel it on your brow when you lie still and try to sleep. You wake up hours later and reach for your face convinced it's still there. You imagine the weight, the heat, the damp air echoing in the chamber of iron. You haven't worn it in days, but Its shape lingers in your body like memory, or like warning. You've begun to hear echoes where none exist. Not always, but often enough. Sometimes your own breath sounds louder than it should, like it's still being funneled through iron. Sometimes your heartbeat seems amplified, thudding behind your ears like it did beneath the mask. Once you woke to the unmistakable sound of air rasping against the metal grill near your mouth, except you weren't wearing it. You sat up slowly, trembling, and pressed your hand to your bare face, just to confirm it was real. It was. But the sound had felt real too. The mask doesn't need to be on your face to shape your thoughts. That's what you've come to understand. Its presence, even occasional, is enough to teach your mind new habits. Caution, silence, isolation. It makes you turn inward during every quiet moment, bracing for its return. You found yourself mouthing words you no longer say aloud, whispering answers to questions no one asked, reciting scraps of memory like they're prayers. You know you're alone, but you also know how quickly the mask can come back, and that knowledge sits behind everything. Sometimes you catch yourself holding your breath, just to check whether you still can. You count the seconds. You wait until your chest starts to burn. Then you release it slowly, like the hiss of air through iron slats, not to calm yourself, but to remember. To remind your body what it has endured, what it will endure again. The worst part isn't the noise or the pressure or even the blindness. It's what happens after. When you're back in the cell, when the mask has been returned to its chest, the blindfold folded away, the guards departed. That's when the silence takes on a different shape. Hollow, expectant, somehow louder than anything you experienced while bound. It's the silence of after, of knowing they can take your face away again, at any moment, without cause, without warning, without a word. You wonder sometimes whether that's the point, not concealment, not punishment, but intrusion, a ritual of unmaking repeated just often enough to keep your edges frayed. They don't need the mask to be constant. Its unpredictability is enough to bend your mind around it. You never know when it's coming. You just know that it will. You try not to think about what it looks like. You've never seen it from the outside, only felt its inner surfaces, but you've imagined it, cold, smooth, featureless, a blank oval that steals identity by offering none in return. You think about what you must look like wearing it, less like a man, more like an object, a symbol, something to be stored, transported, hidden. Even now, without it on, you feel like that's all you are. The irony is that it was never meant to destroy you. You understand that now. If they wanted to break you, they'd leave it on. Let it rot your skin, muffle your speech, steal your breath, but they don't. They only bring it out to remind you, to show you how easily you can be vanished. The mask is not a punishment, it's a boundary, a line between what the world is allowed to see and what must never be seen again. And so you sit in your cell, barefaced, alone, and already bracing for the next time. You tell yourself you're still whole, you still know your name, your shape, your voice, but every time the mask returns, it takes another sliver with it. Not violently, just permanently, like it was never yours to keep. The first time you hear the name of a city you don't recognise, you think you've misheard. A guard mutters it under his breath while folding a letter, and you pause, unsure if it's a place that's always existed or if the world outside has grown in your absence. The name means nothing to you. No memory stirs. It feels foreign, which is strange, because once you knew geography, you're sure of it. But now, even maps feel imaginary. Things other people carry in their heads. You picture the land shifting without you, new borders drawn, new towns named, and you realise the world has continued. It comes in fragments mostly. A passing reference, a conversation carried too close to your door. One guard grumbling to another about the taxes, another humming a tune you don't recognise. Once, you hear the phrase, "since the treaty," but no one says which one. You can't keep track. They don't tell you anything directly, of course. You're not meant to be informed. But history seeps in, uninvited, like water through a cracked roof. It drips slowly at first, then soaks the whole ceiling. You begin to piece together timelines that no longer include you. One king is mentioned less and less. Another name starts to replace his. You try to recall the age of the first one, when last you heard it spoken. You do the math in your head and realise he must be dead. You sit with that for a long time, not because you mourn him, but because it means you've lived long enough for a monarch to die of age. You had always assumed you'd be buried before he was. Ministers vanish, replaced by new ones with names you don't know how to pronounce. Alliances shift. There's a war in a place you've never seen, fought for reasons no one explains. Sometimes the guards are more tense, sometimes more relaxed. You try to gauge the state of the realm based on how firmly they close your food slot. It's a crude system, but it's all you have. The Bastille may be sealed from view, but the outside world still leaks in, just enough to torment you with its forward motion. You used to imagine people asking questions. In the early years, you thought someone must be wondering what happened to you. A friend, a relative, a lover. You pictured whispered inquiries at court, hands on shoulders, concerned looks exchanged at banquets. But now, the idea seems childish. No one has come, no one has written, no one has demanded answers. If they ever cared, they've long since stopped. You start to wonder how many people still even know you existed, not in memory, but in fact, on paper, in conversation. The guards change too often for any one of them to know your whole story. Maybe there's a record somewhere, a document in a locked drawer with your name on it. Or maybe not. Maybe the only place you were ever recorded has been burned, lost, rewritten. You start to suspect you're a loose thread in the tapestry, snipped, curled, and buried before anyone noticed it was gone. The world's concerns shift to things you no longer understand. Fashion changes, language softens and twists. You notice that certain words sound different now, pronounced with a new cadence, a new rhythm, as if the very vowels have aged without you. You catch phrases that seem absurd, references you don't follow. Once you hear a guard laughing at a play you've never seen. It was written 10 years ago, he says. 10 years. A whole performance, a full cast of people speaking lines you'll never hear. You don't know what season it is anymore. You stopped keeping track a long time ago. The slit in the wall lets in light, but not context. No snow, no flowers, no leaves, just brightness or gloom. Sometimes you feel warmth, sometimes you don't. That's the extent of your calendar. Outside, there could be revolution. There could be plague. There could be fireworks or famine. And you would never know unless someone mentioned it while ladling your soup. Even your fantasies begin to change. You no longer imagine freedom in the present tense. You don't think about walking outside or seeing the stars or tasting fresh bread. Instead, you imagine what it would be like to be remembered. Not rescued, just acknowledged. A line in a ledger, a rumour at a cafe, a noblewoman saying, "There was once a man." You picture someone studying your case in the future, tilting their head at a line of blacked out text. But even those fantasies begin to fade. There are too many new scandals now, too many modern embarrassments that take priority. Your story is old, not dramatic, not recent, just quietly inconvenient. The mask rusts a little more each time it's strapped to your face. You feel the flaking edge near your jaw, the slight drag of metal that no longer fits as smoothly. You think about how you've aged underneath it, how the lines on your face must have deepened, how your hair must have thinned. But the mask hasn't changed, not in any meaningful way. It remains the same instrument it always was, cold, impersonal, erasing. The world has shifted around you, but the mask has stayed. It is the most consistent thing in your life, more permanent than any name. You begin to wonder whether the future will even remember there was someone behind it. Not a legend, not a threat, just a man, quiet, waiting, forgotten. You used to assume there was a cause, a moment, a reason, some specific act or word or gesture that led you here, a signature on a letter, a misplaced sentence, overheard in the wrong corridor. But the longer you sit in silence, the more the world moves without you, the more you come to understand that this place isn't punishment, it's precaution. You are not here because of what you did. You are here because of what someone feared you might do, or might have been, or might have said. You're a ghost preemptively buried, a secret scrubbed clean before it could be whispered. A problem solved not through trial or verdict, but through absence. You've come to understand the nature of your captivity not as an accident or even a crime, but as a calculation, a decision made with eyes open and hands steady. At first, this realization brings anger, a low, slow burn in your chest that flares each time you recall how little you've been told. You want to shout, to accuse, but there is no one to hear it. And besides, you've worn the silence too long for noise to fit you anymore. Eventually, the anger burns itself out, leaving only a kind of brittle clarity. You weren't locked up because you posed a danger. You were locked up because someone couldn't afford the possibility that you might. You start to think of yourself as a placeholder, a variable, a threat without content. It's no longer even clear whether the mask was meant to hide your identity from the world, or the world's guilt from itself. It doesn't matter who you were, not really. It matters that someone, somewhere, believed you could make a dent in something they needed to keep whole. Maybe you were royal. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you knew a name you weren't supposed to, or had a face too similar to someone who mattered. You no longer believe it's about facts. It was always about narrative. And you were inconvenient to the one they wanted to tell. There's a cruelty to that. Not in what they did, but in how cleanly they did it. You weren't dragged through the streets. You weren't publicly denounced. There was no theatre to it. Just silence, procedure, protocol. You were removed the way one snuffs out a candle. Not because it was dangerous, but because the light drew too much attention. You don't know who gave the order, but you know they slept fine afterward. People always sleep fine when the erasure is tidy. You begin to think about the stories people tell to stay in power, the myths of unity, of divine right, of perfect lineage and unbroken wisdom. Monarchs don't need those stories to be true. They just need them to be unchallenged. And that's what you were, a challenge, not a sword, not a scream, just a presence that didn't fit neatly into the script. A line in the margin someone decided was safer erased. In your quieter moments, you wonder whether you ever existed at all. Not in the literal sense. You know you were born, had a body, a voice, but in the way people mean when they say he mattered. Were you ever more than context, more than a shadow cast by someone else's light? You imagine yourself as a note passed between courtiers, quickly crumpled and burned after reading. Not because of what it said, but because of who might have seen it. That's the part that stays with you. The fact that your imprisonment wasn't personal. It wasn't even about you. You were locked away because someone else needed a clean page. You're not the villain of the story. You're not the hero either. You're the editing mark that had to be removed so the plot could continue smoothly. The silence around you wasn't just secrecy, it was strategy. A space carved into the narrative so carefully that no one would ever notice the gap unless they knew exactly where to look. But no one does. Or if they do, they've learned not to say. The guards have changed again. The new ones don't speak. They don't linger. They move like men fulfilling an obligation they don't understand. You are no longer an open secret. You are a closed file. Not a mystery, but a footnote too risky to footnote. They don't know who you are. They don't want to know. Because knowing implies responsibility. And responsibility implies a problem. And problems are dangerous. So they feed you. They clean the cell. They strap on the mask when ordered. But they do not ask. They do not imagine. The system protects itself by pretending you were never anything at all. You have no trial to appeal, no crime to confess, no sentence to complete. You are not being held until you are being held instead. Instead of explanation, instead of embarrassment, instead of unraveling something bigger than you. You think sometimes about the idea of justice, not the grand kind, just the simple version, where people are seen and acknowledged and placed where they belong. But where do you belong? You're not a prisoner, you're not a citizen, you're not a man anymore, you're the space they cleared to preserve the illusion. And yet you remain, breathing, waiting, wearing the story they were too frightened to write down. You know something is different the moment the key turns. The sound is too careful, not rushed, not routine. You sit up slowly, no blindfold, no mask, just a door opening with the deliberate weight of ceremony. You're not shackled, not warned, not spoken to. 2 guards enter, rigid as ever, but their movements are sharper than usual, less bored, more rehearsed. One of them adjusts his posture when the door swings wider. Then he appears. The visitor. He doesn't announce himself, he doesn't ask your name or offer his, but you can tell by the set of his coat, the polish of his boots, the faint scent of perfume beneath travel dust, that this is not a warden, not a minister. This is someone who steps into rooms expecting them to adjust around him. A nobleman, probably. High enough not to fear consequence. Important enough to be granted access to secrets that aren't supposed to have names. He stands in the doorway a moment too long. You wonder if he's deciding whether to enter or just hoping to understand what he's about to see before it sees him. His eyes skim the room first. The cot, the wall, the food tray, then you. He doesn't startle, doesn't flinch, just studies you the way a scholar studies a painting, with the wrong brush strokes. Like he's trying to decipher what, exactly, went wrong. He doesn't speak. You're not sure if he's here to verify you exist or confirm that you no longer do. His gaze lingers on your hands, your posture, your face. There's no shock there, no pity, only calculation. You get the feeling he's seen worse, or caused worse. But what unnerves you is that he doesn't seem angry, doesn't even seem curious. He observes you with the detachment of someone inspecting a locked drawer to make sure it's still locked. You're not a man to him, you're a condition. For a moment you wonder if you recognize him. If this is someone from before, a face blurred by time, once familiar, now just an echo in finer clothes. There's something about the eyes, the stillness. You squint slightly, hoping the expression might trigger something, but the connection never arrives. You're not sure if the past is too far gone, or if he was never part of it to begin with. He doesn't ask you anything. Not how long you've been here, not who you are, not whether you remember. He doesn't want information, he wants confirmation. You wonder what's been written about you, what notes he read before stepping into this room, what rumours he came here to measure against your flesh. He looks at you like he's checking a seal, making sure nothing's broken open, making sure you're still silent. He stays longer than he needs to, says nothing the entire time. At one point, his jaw tightens, not in disgust, not in sorrow, in recognition, perhaps, of something he's never had to carry, or maybe something he has. You realise uncomfortably that he's not just here to see you, he's here to look into a version of himself that someone else might have locked away under different circumstances. He breaks eye contact finally, turns toward the guards, a small nod. They don't speak either. They don't have to. One of them opens the door. The other steps aside. The nobleman leaves the room without looking back. The silence that follows is worse than before, not heavier, emptier. It feels like something was scraped out of the room and not replaced. Like his presence erased something delicate. And now even the air doesn't know how to settle. You lie back down on the cot, the door remains shut. The guards resume their routine, and nothing changes. But now, you know someone came. Someone who mattered. Someone who looked at you with purpose and left without a word. And the worst part isn't that he didn't speak. It's that he didn't need to. His silence was permission. Not to keep you here, but to keep pretending you don't matter. You start to wonder if he'll come back, if he was sent, if he volunteered. You imagine him climbing back into his carriage, brushing the dust from his sleeves, sipping wine at supper while thinking about you, not with guilt, but curiosity. You picture him recounting the visit in vague terms over a fire-lit conversation. Yes, he's still alive, still quiet, nothing more, as if that's all you are now. A report, a condition checked off a list. You try to reconstruct his face, but your mind distorts it already. The angles blur, the lines fade. You can't remember if he was old or just tired. You can't remember if his eyes were sad or simply reflective. All you remember is how still he was, and how you didn't speak, how you couldn't. Not because you were afraid, not because you were silenced, but because after all this time, you've learned that speech is an invitation, and no one here has ever come to listen. You die without ceremony. Not in protest, not in pain, not even in awareness. One moment your heart is beating, slow, tired, but steady. The next, it simply decides to stop. There's no gasp, no flailing of limbs, no final look toward the slit in the stone where light sometimes filters through. You aren't reaching for anyone. You haven't done that in years. You're just lying there, wrapped in your blanket, your breathing shallow enough that it's almost indistinguishable from stillness, until it isn't. No one comes right away. Your body cools before it's noticed. Perhaps it's the smell that alerts them, or maybe a shift in routine, your failure to sit up when the slot opens, or the quiet way your tray remains untouched. Either way, they don't rush. There's no alarm. The guards have seen death before, probably even here, probably even like this. When the door finally creaks open, the men who enter do not speak. They don't kneel to check your pulse. One looks at the other. The second gives a nod. That's the only acknowledgement your passing receives. They lift your body with the same care used for broken furniture, gently but impersonally. Not out of respect, but out of practiced motion. One at the shoulders, one at the feet. The blanket is still wrapped around you, so they don't have to look at your face. Not that it matters. You haven't been a person to them for years. Just a condition. Just a detail in their routine. The corridor outside is cold. Your body leaves no trace behind. No trail, no stain, no lingering heat. The cell is quiet again the moment the door shuts. Someone will come to clean it later. Wipe the cot. Replace the linens. Remove the used water jug. There is no mourning. No muttered prayers. Just steps echoing down stone halls and the faint sound of a latch being reset. You are not buried with a name. There is no tombstone, no marker, no inscription hidden in a church ledger. You are placed in a box, plain and unadorned, and delivered to the part of the Bastille where such things are dealt with, efficiently, discreetly, without question. The man who receives the body assigns nothing. He does not ask where it came from. He does not comment on the mask, which now lies beside your corpse, stripped off and set aside like old clothing. Someone cleans the mask, not lovingly, just thoroughly. The rust is scraped, the lining is replaced, the straps checked for rot. Then it's placed back in its drawer, deep inside a cabinet designed for objects too sensitive to destroy, but too problematic to leave in view. It will wait there. For what, no one knows. It doesn't matter. Objects outlive explanations, and your story was never written down. If there was a file, it's burned. If there was a name, it's struck out. If someone comes looking, one day, some minister or archivist or stray grandson curious about old rumours, they will find nothing. A blank line in a logbook, an empty shelf where a folder once sat, or perhaps just a phrase, classified, discontinued. That will be enough to stop the questions, or to redirect them elsewhere. Outside the prison, life continues with a kind of arrogant fluidity. A new war breaks out. The king hosts another ball. Courtiers squabble. A mistress falls from favour. A general rises. One generation dies, another takes its place. France remains France. and no one mentions you, not even by accident, not even as a cautionary tale. Your silence was so complete, so well maintained, that it outlived your heartbeat. That was the goal after all. Somewhere someone remembers you, briefly. A guard who once wondered, a clerk who glimpsed a note, a nobleman who saw your face and never forgot it, even if he never spoke of it again. But memory is slippery. It doesn't survive without repetition, and no one says your name. No one repeats your story. No one even whispers. And so the memory of you, whoever you were, whatever you represented, fades like dust swept into a draftless corner. Your death is not unjust. It is not dramatic. It is not undeserved, because it was never about deserving anything. You were not executed. You were not sentenced. You were shelved. And now you are discarded. No, the state has no guilt to express. There is no apology, no inquiry, no acknowledgement that anything has happened at all. The world keeps spinning. The Bastille keeps standing. The mask stays in its drawer, waiting for a future that may never come. This was never about you. That's the final indignity. You died in a system that wasn't designed to hate you, only to forget you. And it did. Thoroughly, quietly, completely. And now you are gone. Centuries pass, the Bastille falls. Stones are carted away by revolutionaries, each brick carried off like a trophy from the grave of tyranny. The prison becomes legend. The monarchy becomes memory. And you, who are neither legend nor memory, become something else entirely. A riddle, a curiosity, a name without a name. Eventually, someone finds a record. Not a clear one, of course. A note in the margin, a line in a journal, a payment made to a jailer for special accommodations. There is no face attached, no confession. Just a hint of someone once kept out of sight. That's all it takes. One thread, a whisper, and suddenly you're alive again, not as a man, but as a question. Theories bloom like weeds in the cracks of history. You were the twin of the king. You were a noble traitor, a foreign spy, a disgraced general, a scorned lover, a monk who knew too much, a valet who overheard the wrong conversation, a prince, a pauper, a mistake. Every theory fits, and none of them do. The less the facts align, the more the stories flourish. Because people don't like gaps in their past. They'd rather fill them with fantasy than admit the silence might be intentional. Writers seize on you first, the dramatists, the novelists, the poets. They imagine you tragic, noble, defiant, romantic. They give you a voice, a face, a cause. They name you. Again and again, they name you. Sometimes as Lewis's brother, sometimes as a revolutionary, sometimes as a hero in disguise. They put love in your heart, fire in your blood, purpose in your imprisonment. They try to make it mean something. Because the truth, that you were inconvenient and nothing more, is too empty for fiction to stomach. Historians follow, slower but no less eager. They measure the facts, cross-reference records, publish papers with cautious titles and speculative footnotes. A few try to be precise, but the precision leads nowhere. Too many files were burned. Too many witnesses died with their mouths shut. The gaps cannot be closed. Some embrace that uncertainty. Others fight it. A few invent answers and call them evidence, but all of them circle the same hollow centre. No one knows who you were. Tour guides mention you now. They point to the foundations where the Bastille once stood and talk of the man in the mask. Visitors listen, eyes wide, imagining dark stone cells and whispered betrayals. They gasp at the idea of a man hidden for decades, his identity concealed even in death. Some take photos beside plaques that never mention your name. Others buy books about you, novels wrapped in gilded letters. They remember the mask, not the man. The iron survived. You didn't. You've become a myth not because you mattered, but because you were erased so thoroughly that people assume you must have mattered. That kind of silence feels deliberate, expensive, heavy. It makes people uneasy, and unease breeds stories. You are proof that history doesn't need facts to endure. Just discomfort. Just the sense that someone somewhere knew something they weren't supposed to say. In this way, your legacy becomes self-sustaining. You are remembered not for what you did, but because someone once decided no one else should know what you did. You are remembered not because you changed the world, but because you were buried deep enough that someone assumed you must have tried to. You are not feared. You are not honoured. You are speculated, puzzled over, dressed up in meaning you never earned and never wanted. And all the while, the truth, the dull, bureaucratic truth, gathers dust in a corner no one thinks to search. That you were likely a nobody. That you were probably forgotten before you even died. That your mask wasn't hiding power or danger or scandal, but error. Someone's decision made hastily and never revisited. You weren't hidden to protect the throne. You were hidden because it was easier than admitting a mistake. But that's not a satisfying story, so the world keeps inventing better ones. Somewhere the mask may still exist, tucked away in a drawer, or melted down, or mislabeled in a museum archive, or hanging in a private collection, passed off as a prop, a replica, a curiosity with no context. No one looks too closely. It's safer that way. Easier to preserve the mystery than to stumble over the banality behind it. Because that's the final twist, isn't it? The mask was never the mystery. You were. And even now, centuries later, people are still afraid to look too closely. Not because they might find something horrifying, but because they might find nothing at all. And what then would that say about the power that kept you hidden? What would it say about the kings and ministers who imprisoned a man, not for what he knew, but for what they feared he might remember? What would it say about a system so obsessed with perfection that it would rather erase a man completely than risk an untidy truth? You are gone now, long gone, but the questions remain, and they will outlive you. That is your legacy. Not justice, not revenge, not revelation. Just a question mark where a name used to be. That brings us to the end of tonight's quiet unraveling. A tale not of triumph or tragedy, but of slow, deliberate erasure behind polished doors and iron masks. If you're still listening, thank you for wandering with me through this dim corridor of history. If you'd like early access to future stories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see unearthed. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chronicler, Andrew S. Sleep well.